Hello there. Good morning. Welcome back, guys. Hope you're all doing great. And yeah, we just have about 3 minutes till it's 9 a.m. So getting ready for the Monday meeting as usual. Monday, April 5th. Hope you all had a really good weekend. And yeah, just get comfortable and we'll start in a few. As usual, feel free to say hello or anything else in the chat whenever. Hey, Ryan, how's it going? Good to see you. Yeah, for sure. I've now had the second dose of the Pfizer vaccine, so I'm fully, I guess, vaccinated. They say it takes 2 weeks for it to be 100%, functional, but I have not heard of anybody getting the second dose and still getting COVID. So 100% of people who get this vaccine don't go to the hospital or die from COVID. So that's a good thing to know. It does give you a little extra peace of mind, just kind of walking around, feeling like your life's not at risk every time you're close to people. So it's nice, but yeah, that was Saturday. Made me feel like a little loopy over the weekend, to be honest. There were no side effects really, just kind of felt a little tired and like out of it, I guess, but physically no real issues. So yeah. Good to see all you guys. Hi, Grant, Connor, Kylie, Alex, Abby. Yeah, welcome back. Just another minute or so. And hi, Eloise. Good to see you too. Stephen. Yeah. Dimitri, Drew. As usual, and as I've said before, it's an open offer to those that are confident in doing it. If anyone wants to come and try and, to the physical meetings, totally fine. But it's also no problem to stick with the way we've been doing things. So anyway, I'm here in the Argyrios forum for those that are interested in trying it out. My 10 o'clock class, we have about 2 or 3 people coming. It's definitely a little different getting back into the room with people. Hi, Marin, Brian, and everyone else. Ryan, Jianyan, good to see you guys. Okay, so let's go on and get started. Welcome back, guys. Thanks so much for being here over the weekend. Yesterday, I think, I sent to you just a little video. It's a sort of supplemental video that helps to drive home the lessons on the Gettier problem and the Gettier cases. So take a look at that if you do have a chance. It's pretty short, and there's some, little cartoon images that kind of make the examples hit like a little better and a little more clearly. So that's for you to check out if you like. And as you guys know, I did, finish the midterms last week. So I responded to all the messages that I got through Saturday, but there might have been some that came in yesterday. Don't worry, if you did email me yesterday and you're waiting on your reply, I'll certainly get back to you as my policy within 48 hours. So not to worry, you're in line if you have sent me a message, and I'll get to you. But I've talked to all the others so far. Pretty good distribution overall, but those that are emailing me would know the details about their own exam. So, okay, guys, let's just keep moving. We have another author that we're going to try to get to today. Let me just quickly recap the material on Gettier and say a last few words about his essay there. So we're learning about the theory of knowledge, what they call epistemology. And we started by just learning that the original account of knowledge that we've learned from in the West was given by the ancient Greeks, Plato, and his teacher Socrates. And long story short, they say that knowledge is justified true belief, JTB, meaning that when you have knowledge of something, you think it's true, that's to believe it, but you don't just think it's true, it actually is. So it's correct and it's factually true. So belief and truth. And then the third is justification, meaning that you have good evidence or grounds to base your belief on. So when you believe something which is true with good evidence, they say this is knowledge, or at least that was the Socratic account, the Platonic account. Plato was careful to note that justification is a major element in the definition because it transfers something which would have just been a lucky guess or a correct opinion into something which is a case of knowledge. And he uses the metaphor of the ropes from the statues that provide stability to these statues and prevent them from leaving. He thinks that's kind of how justification works when it comes to your true beliefs. The evidence that you have keeps these true beliefs in your mind, so you retain the information essentially, and you get to hold on to it. Okay, but then there was Gettier. Gettier, fast forward to the 20th century, 2,000 years later, American philosopher Gettier says, is justified true belief knowledge, really? And the way he goes about it is he says, okay, first of all, the definition of knowledge from the Greeks is JTB. And even though it could be stated a few different ways, that's the essential definition that they gave us. Then he states two preliminary points. For one, it's possible to have a justified false belief. Think of a mistaken conviction at trial where the evidence indicates guilt, but it was somehow misleading. So it's possible, even if not the typical case, to have a justified but nonetheless false belief. The other point mentioned was the so-called closure principle, which says that if you have justification to believe one statement, then you deduce a further statement from it, which is entailed by it. Then you would also be justified in believing the latter statement that has been deduced from the first. So when you got justification for one thing, it carries over to something else that is implied by it. Okay, so from there he lists these Gettier cases. We really focused on his primary case one, and that's the Smith and Jones job hunt scenario. Quickly, I'll tell you again the scenario. So Smith and Jones are both looking for a job. They're competing for the job, and they're the finalists. The boss has interviewed them, and he can only take one person for the position. So the final interviews are done, and the boss has a private moment with Smith. He says to Smith secretly, hey, Smith, just letting you know, I'm going to actually hire Jones instead of you. Sorry, but I will not hire you. I will hire Jones. Smith then believes Jones will get the job. Following after that, Smith takes this decision to do something strange, which is to count the coins in Jones' pocket. And once he counts them, he sees there's 10. So now he has a full belief that Jones will get the job and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Now, simply using an elementary deduction, he recognizes that a second statement follows logically from this, that the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket is a logical consequence of the statement that Jones gets it and Jones has 10 coins. So he deduces this second proposition, which just does not name Jones, but instead refers to the generic label, the man who gets the job. Now, do you remember the plot twist? The little plot twist that happens at the end, which is kind of a feature of all Gettier cases all through, is that the boss comes back, he says to Smith, hey, Smith, surprise, I was kidding, haha, I'm hiring you. So what do you think about that? Congratulations, it's you. So Smith got the job. And totally by coincidence, it just so happens that he randomly has 10 coins in his own pocket too. So going back to the proposition that Smith deduced, which I just referred to, the man who gets the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Smith believed it. And due to the closure principle, we can say that that was justified for him to believe. The evidence that he used was the boss's report plus the counting of the coins of Jones. So he arrived at this justified belief in that statement, and it turned out to be true. So it's a justified true belief. But due to the weird, fluky, lucky way that it turned out to be true, since it's completely unrelated to his evidence gathering process, the fact that he ended up with a true belief is mere chance. So it seems like it's a justified true belief that's not knowledge. Now, thus, showing a counterexample to the classical definition. If it was a closed and complete definition of knowledge, then we shouldn't be able to generate such counterexamples where there's a JTB that's not K. But there we have this example. And I gave you guys other examples too, the hallucination case or whatever, the car parking lot scenario. There is a second Gettier case in the essay of Gettier. And I thought to myself, maybe I should at least briefly report on it to you guys since it's in the book and you might look at it. So I'll rush through it a little bit quickly because the first one is the most essential example that he gives that everyone usually refers to, but there is number two, Gettier case 2. So let me just talk you through this if I could. In the second Gettier case, we again have two characters named Smith and Jones, okay? Now, in this new version, Smith and Jones are co-workers at the same company or office. And what Smith believes is that Jones owns a Ford car. He believes Jones owns a Ford car, and he has great evidence for this. Why does he think so? Well, he says so because Jones pulls up to work in a Ford. And at the end of the day, sometimes Smith is like, hey, can I catch a ride from you, Jones? And Jones is like, sure, hop in my Ford that I own, because I'm a Ford owner, and we'll go home and I'll drop you off. And he drops him off in the Ford. So he pulls up to work in a Ford. He brags about, I love Fords. I'm a Ford man. By the way, did I tell you I own a Ford? It gets a little old, but he keeps on hammering it home. I own a Ford. You see that one parked on the street? It's mine. Okay. He's giving rides in the car. He's telling people he owns it. Blah, blah, blah. So it's abundant evidence. That's the point, that this guy owns a Ford car. So Smith believes that Jones owns a Ford. Now, the next part of the example is a little weird because it takes a little detour into the realm of logic. But when it comes to logic, there's a certain type of sentence. We discussed this earlier in the semester when we talked about Pascal's wager. So there's what we call disjunctions. There's conjunctions, there's disjunctions, conditionals. Well, anyway, what's a disjunction? That's an or sentence. Like if I say to you that I will either come to class or sleep in, that's an either or statement. And the two things that are on either side of the word or, we call those the two disjuncts of the disjunction. So if I say to you that I will either sleep in or come to class, the first disjunct is that I will sleep in, and the second disjunct is that I would come to class. So with the disjunction, one thing that is true is this. If even one of the two disjuncts is a fact, then the whole disjunction is true. Like, for example, right now, can we agree on this statement? Either Dr. Vulich is wearing glasses or the moon is made of cheese. Now, it's a weird sentence, I understand that, but it's true. And why is it true? Because it says either I'm wearing these glasses, which I currently am, or the moon is made of cheese. Now, the moon is not made of cheese, but the statement doesn't say and. So it doesn't say both Vulich is wearing glasses and the moon is made of cheese. That would be false because one of the two conjuncts is not the case. So with a conjunction, an and statement, both elements must be true. But with a disjunction, it's either or. So if I tell you I will either get pizza or tacos, I don't have to eat both for that to be a true statement. I could just choose one and not the other. So back to the case, Smith believes Jones owns a Ford, and he knows his logic. So he knows that based on that justification, he's also justified in believing any disjunction where that is one of the two disjuncts. So he forms three disjunctive beliefs totally at random. He has another friend, Smith does, whose name is Brown, and he's lost touch with Mr. Brown. So long lost friend, Brown. He has no idea where in the world this guy is. So he does have a justified belief, though, that Jones owns a Ford. So he produces these three statements in his mind. There are three disjunctions. The first member of the disjunction is Jones owns a Ford. So it's either Jones owns a Ford or, and then the latter portion are the place names of three distinct locations where Brown could be. But Smith doesn't know where Brown is. So here's the three. Either Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Boston. Either Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Barcelona. Either Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in, this is an Eastern European kind of obscure city, Brest-Litovsk. Okay, so here's the plot twist of this Gettier case. The whole time, Jones has been putting on like an elaborate ruse to deceive everyone into thinking he drives a Ford. That's not his car, that's a rental. He's pulling up in a rental Ford. So when he says, I own a Ford, it's all false, and it's an elaborately constructed lie, but it seems like he does. So he doesn't own a Ford. But randomly and totally by coincidence, Brown, the long-lost friend, happens to be chilling in Barcelona, like watching bullfights or something. So the second disjunctive belief that either Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Barcelona turns out to be true. But it's true only due to the second disjunct that Smith had no information about. His justification, though, derives from the first disjunct, which ended up being false. So it's another example, we're supposed to take this point home, of having a justified true belief that did not amount to knowledge. In this case, the justified true belief is either Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Barcelona. It was believed by Smith. It was justified for him to believe it because of the evidence he had for the first disjunct. But in the end, the fact that it was true had to do with the other disjunct. There's another like version of this Smith and Jones office case where Smith believes that Jones owns a Ford because of the reasons that I told you. And then he deduces that someone in the office owns a Ford. Okay. And let's suppose, though, that, as I said before, Jones was lying the whole time, but making it look really reasonable to assume he had one. And some other guy in the office who never comes to work in his car, who rides a bike to the office, he's the owner of the Ford. So if that was the case, do you feel what I'm saying? Smith would have believed that someone in the office owns a Ford. He would have been justified in that belief. And it's true, but not because of the identity of the person who he thought it was. And yet again, then we say it's not really knowledge, even though it's a justified true belief. Okay, guys, so just last few words on the Gettier. I didn't want to leave all those pieces behind. So you can also reinforce your knowledge about that element if you go to the video that I shared, because it talks about both of the Gettier cases and then a couple of other ones too. But now it's time to keep moving forward in the lecture series. We have another author to cover today or try to get into. And so here he is. I'm going to talk to you guys about the very important and well-known French philosopher of the early modern era named René Descartes. Okay, so here's the guy's name for today. Okay, so he's a French philosopher. So you see he has this kind of French name, René Descartes. Famously, sometimes people stumble on pronouncing his name because this S is like silent in both cases. Descartes. It's not really Descartes, but whatever. As you know, an English speaker, sometimes those soft S's and stuff are hard. But anyway, René Descartes. Now, when did he live? He lived from 1596 until 1650. Sometimes this is kind of in the range of time people refer to as the early modern period, closely following the Renaissance era. And we're looking at material that he wrote in a book of his from 1641. And this is his classic work that's most well known by him, called The Meditations. The Meditations from 1641. Okay, full title of this book, it's kind of a little longer, Meditations on First Philosophy, but colloquially in the academy, a lot of times people just call it Descartes' Meditations or The Meditations. Okay, so now I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about why he wrote this book and what the point of it was to sort of set the stage for the lecture. So consider the time period that he's living in. As you can see, it's the 17th century, 1600s, right? And as I was trying to just sort of indicate, this is an important time period in the history of the Western world because we're starting to see rapid advances in all types of scientific, academic knowledge throughout each discipline. So, for example, in physics, we're starting to learn Newton's laws. And so we're getting more detailed understanding of how physical facts operate in the universe. Newly invented telescopes are starting to give us greater powers to examine the orbits of the celestial objects and our placement in the cosmos. Let's see, calculus is being developed by Leibniz and also by Newton. We're starting to learn facts about the cellular composition of biological matter, like the core element of living matter is the cell. In geometry, we're starting to develop new advances. In fact, the Cartesian coordinates that some of you may have studied are due to the name of Descartes, his namesake, Cartesian, because he was also a geometrician and a mathematician in addition to his work in philosophy. So, you know, in all of these very important fields, there's rapid strides being made, and that's why some call it the Age of Reason. So, due to this kind of explosion of knowledge, much of which had been kind of suppressed under the medieval era's standard of kind of letting the church be the preeminent institution for disseminating knowledge to human beings, we're starting to see a little bit more of independence in the academy from just the orthodox strictures of the church, and it's producing all kinds of impressive gains in human science and knowledge. So anyway, in that intellectual context, Descartes writes this book, The Meditations, and here's the goal that he has behind writing it. He thinks, I ought to make sure that as we're developing this towering structure of human knowledge, that we make sure it's founded on something solid, that it has a solid, firm base foundation. Because if you think of like a metaphor of architecture, for example, even if you have the most impressive and ornate towering structure, if it's built on a weak foundation of like, I don't know, quicksand or something, then it's likely to tower over at some point and collapse. So we got to make sure that we're not starting off on the wrong foot, basically, as we pursue all these interesting fields of human knowledge. So he's looking then for some certainty. The book Meditations is a quest for something that cannot be doubted. He says this foundation stone of the edifice of human knowledge has got to be something that is totally certain so that we could never ever doubt it. Because again, if we end up having to reject the foundations of our knowledge system later, then everything that we built on it will be like poisoned fruit that also has to be rejected. So he says, let us find some type of certainty that we can then use to place as the foundations for this growing body of human knowledge. So Meditations, he says, let's find what is certain. Now, I'll read you a little bit of his words as he begins the first chapter. Now, the Meditations is a book which has 6 chapters, and each chapter of the book is labeled a different numbered meditation. So you have meditation 1, meditation 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So 6 chapters, but they call them meditations 1 through 6. And the lesson for today, anyway, is supposed to be meditation 1 and 2. So the first 2 chapters. That's the topic for us. Later on in the class, when we get to one of our last topics, which is the philosophy of mind, we'll talk about meditation 6, actually. So by the time our semester is over, we will have all read half of this classic work in philosophy. And I think that 1, 2, and 6 are the 3 chapters of the book that are, the greatest value and philosophic importance. So you're really getting to the good parts. Okay, so meditation 1. Here's how he starts, the very beginning. And you'll hear him say kind of what I was just describing, that he's looking for certainty and he doesn't want to have to reject all the things that he's built up as knowledge later because the foundations were false. And also, before I read, I'll say this. Descartes, from my personal perspective, is one of the clear and lucid writers in philosophy, expressive, sometimes even a little funny. So, that's a nice change of pace at times because, as you know, philosophy writing can in some cases be dry, academic, and, all of that, which it has that flavor too, but it's just a little bit more literary in a way it reads. So here's what he says to begin meditation 1. Some years ago, I was struck by the large number of falsehoods that I had accepted as true in my childhood, and by the highly doubtful nature of the whole structure that I had then based on them. I realized that it was necessary once in the course of my life to demolish everything completely and start right again from the foundations if I want to establish anything at all in the sciences that was stable and likely to last. But the task looked enormous, and I began to wait until I should reach a mature enough age to ensure that no subsequent time of life would be more suitable for tackling such an inquiry. And this led me to put the project off for so long that now I would be to blame if by pondering over it any further I wasted the time I still have left to carry it out. So today, I have explicitly rid my mind of all worries and arranged for myself a clear stretch of free time. I'm alone, and at last I will devote myself sincerely and without reservation to the general demolition of my opinions. So he's going to try and find that certainty. Now, how do we discover what's certain? Descartes says there's a methodology that can be used to discover this, okay? And so this is one of the first big claims that he makes in this book. He says, in order to discover what it is that is totally certain and cannot be doubted, we have to utilize and employ what's called the method of doubt, okay? So concept for you to now learn, Descartes' method of doubt. Okay, so here's the method of doubt. And again, what is this? This is the tool, the tactic, the method that is used by the author to try and figure out what is certain. All right? I tilt that a little bit. Thank you, guys. Okay, so method of doubt. It says the following. Assume to be false anything and everything that can possibly be doubted. Okay, there's your method of doubt. So you see it written up there. Method of doubt, what to do? To assume to be false anything and everything that can even possibly be doubted. Okay, so what does it mean to be able to doubt something? It means to think that maybe it's not true. So like if somebody told you, I don't know, that they went to Mars or something, you might say, I don't know if I believe you. I think you're not telling me the truth. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with testimony. It could also be just another case, like, you doubt a fact about history, or maybe you doubt some common consensus view, or maybe you doubt yourself, right? You thought that you had a judgment of something in the past, and now you're wondering whether you were right. So doubting is to consider that something's not true. So the method of doubt says this. We want to kind of go overboard with doubt with this method of doubt, right? So the thought is, if there's even one tiny possible chance that something could be false, we're not talking about probable falsehood, but even like a 0.00 million decimal zeros to the 1 0.000 on and on and on, 1% chance that it's false, then just assume it's false and just, make that blanket assumption that anything doubtful is false until and unless you arrive finally at something that can't be doubted. So the method of doubt is kind of like a process of elimination, if you will. Back when I was an undergrad at UCLA a long time ago, I had a professor, and they put this example in the following way. So I thought it was kind of helpful. I'll pass it on to you. Professor said, suppose that you were trying to pick out an apple from the produce section at the store, and you really want this to be the pristine, perfect specimen of an apple. Maybe you're giving it to one of your professors as a gift like they used to do in the olden days. But anyway, you want a perfect apple. So you're looking through this barrel of a bunch of apples. And one that's got a little defect or something, it just won't do, right? You're looking for that unblemished, ideal case of the apple. So you pick one up, you look at it, and you're like, this could be it. I think so. But as you examine it more closely, you're like, not quite. There's a tiny little bruise or mark, some blemish on the apple. So this one, off to the side, discard it, and it's on to the next. And you keep going through there until you find that one that has no imperfections or flaws, right? Now, with the method of doubt, it's not like we're literally picking apples out of a barrel and discarding them if they have problems, but in a similar sense, we are going through the beliefs in our belief system, holding them up to the light of scrutiny, and just at least temporarily for the sake of the method, assuming them to be false until we find something in there that cannot be doubted, and that would be like the equivalent of finding that perfect specimen of the apple where there's no flaws or defects and no way it could be, in the case of the belief, false. Okay, so that's the method of doubt. The thing is, though, once this method of doubt is employed, it starts to eliminate all kinds of beliefs that we just take for granted as a given every day. So let's try and get into that now. One major source of beliefs that we all rely on, that you're relying on right now even, are your five senses. So beliefs that are based on sense perception. But Descartes says that every belief that you have, which is based on sense perception, could in principle be false, okay? So with sense perception, what is that? Sight, taste, touch, hearing, and sound, the five senses. That's perception for you. That's how you know, I guess, about the things that are happening around you. So look around you, wherever you're at right now. How do you know you're there? Because you can see it, because you can hear the sounds, see the sights of that environment, because you can feel perhaps the tactile quality of the chair that you're in. Or if you're brewing coffee or something, you can maybe smell that. And so you have information provided by five senses at all times. Like, where are you? What is happening there? You'll take stock of it with the five senses. But the five senses are not perfect, and they don't always perfectly well accurately inform us about what's happening. Okay, so one case, of course, could be the case of illusions, hallucinations, optical illusions, seeing a mirage, thinking there's a body of water, but it's just, the effect of heat on your visual system and the environment. Or thinking that a spoon appears bent because you place it within a cup of water, and then the refraction of light makes it appear that there's curvature to the metal spoon, but there's not, in fact, that curvature. Okay, those are more local cases of perceptual error, but I have a question for you. Let's really think outside the box. What would have to be happening right now for you to be wrong about your current belief that you are, watching a YouTube live stream on your device? How could that be false? Because I know that right now that's what you think is happening. So how could it possibly be false, the proposition, the belief that you have that you are right now watching a live stream on YouTube? How could that be wrong? Tell me in the chat if you could think. What possible scenario could make your perception that you're having right now false? So let me know. Because I'm telling you, you're not watching a YouTube lecture. You just think you are. What could be happening in reality? Let's play this game of doubt. So, yeah, think about it. How could it be false? How could it be false that you're sitting in your room watching a YouTube live stream? If what? Okay, good. Yeah, so if you were dreaming, there you go, exactly. So that was the response that I was fishing around for. Well, Claire, you have a different case. You're thinking pre-recorded, but no, that's not it. Instead, we're going all the way. We're talking about the whole world is a big dream that you've been having the whole time, okay? So imagine that. If you're living in a dream right now, or to update the example a little bit more for the 21st century, you're living in a simulation, right? So you're like a product of a big computer program or whatever. Then in that case, or like the Matrix, you could think that you're experiencing an external environment that's real, but in fact, if you're asleep, let's say dreaming, then none of those things would be happening. Now, you might be listening to that and thinking, come on, though. I mean, obviously, this isn't a dream. I know the difference between when I'm asleep and when I'm awake. But okay, look, if you have been asleep the entire time you've been alive and you've never yet been awake, then you have nothing to contrast the vividness and clarity of your perceptual experiences with. And also, just taking the example of dreams that you concede you have had. Sometimes we have quite realistic dreams. Have you ever had those? I know I have. And oftentimes my most memorable dreams are unfortunately the ones that aren't so fun or pleasant. I'll be, something stressful or anxiety inducing. I'll be like trying to give a lecture in a dream. And then all of a sudden I realize I'm slipping up and forgetting my notes and I'm quite embarrassed. Then I wake up, realize that I have a chance to do it again in reality. Or even worse, I've had some types of bad dreams where I'm facing death in the dream, like I'm about to careen off of a cliff because I made a wrong turn while driving in a mountainous area. And, I'm like bracing for impact and thinking all these like last minute thoughts. But then I wake up and I'm like, sweet, okay, so that was just totally not even real. So anyway, the point I'm making by referring to these vivid dreams that we sometimes can have is that according to Descartes' reasoning, you can't completely rule out the possibility that you're living in a very realistic simulation or dream right now. Okay, so with the method of doubt, since that is a possibility, we're going to assume that it's true. Yeah, so you are dreaming, okay? As long as we're playing Descartes' method of doubt, you're right now to assume that everything that you perceive with your five senses is completely false. And even the very basic things, like look in the mirror, how do you think your physical appearance looks? We're also going to assume that even your whole body is a part of this dream illusion. Could be a body that you're only dreaming of having. And in the real reality, the objective reality, maybe you have no such body, or you're just kind of a vapor cloud, or maybe, you have an appearance far different from the one that you think you do have. So nothing from your five senses is now to be trusted, and we will just assume until further notice that it's all false. So this gives us the makings of like a little formal argument that Descartes provides us with. So here's the argument for the dreaming doubt. I'll just kind of put it here. Two premises that lead to the conclusion. The first premise says, to know anything from sense perception, I have to know that I'm not dreaming. So to know anything from sense perception, I must know that I'm not dreaming. That's what this premise says. The second premise below just continues by adding, but there is no way to know that I am not dreaming. But there's no way to know that I'm not dreaming, and so therefore, I don't know anything from sense perception. Okay, so there you go. We see the kind of argument that's behind the reasoning that we've been talking about here. To know anything from sense perception, you'd have to know for sure that you're not dreaming, because in case you're dreaming, these perceptual beliefs are just all illusory. But he's saying there's no way to determine that you're not dreaming, because for any experience that you have, as vivid as it is, it could be the case that that is a vivid dream experience. So in that case, then, he says, we don't know anything from sense perception. So maybe everything that we experience with our five senses is part of a dream that we are having, and therefore all of those beliefs could in theory be false. Now, you might think this. Okay, let's try again then. What is more certain than even sense perception? The next possible option that the author talks about is what if mathematics and stuff and logic and geometry, formal sciences that make no reference to the perceptual world, maybe those things could be claimed as even more certain? Because do you kind of feel what I'm saying? Like, even if you're dreaming right now and there's no such thing as Chapman University or whatever, or even the planet Earth, still 2 + 2 would be what? 4. even if everything's a dream, every triangle would still have to have three sides, you see? So you could argue, because the shape of a triangle or the result of a mathematical equation or formula doesn't seem to depend on any of the spatiotemporal facts of the physical universe. So you can argue maybe those things are more certain. Do we have greater certainty then? No possible room to doubt that like 2 + 2 is 4, or that all the points on the circle are equally distant from the radius? Well, it would seem so, but even there, Descartes says that there's a possibility for doubt. Now, the room for doubt when it comes to math and stuff, it's a little weirder, even than the dream case. Okay, so here, let me explain. He says, well, I know there's God. So Descartes, as well as like the entire literate audience of readership at the time, would have been believers in God for the most part. And so he takes this as a shared assumption. There's a God. Since God is all powerful and almighty, he could do anything. Anything possible, God could do it through his will. So he says, God having that much power, if he wanted to, he could make it seem to you that when you do like a basic math problem, that that's necessarily true and nothing could be more obvious. But even in that case, maybe God could make you going wrong. So when you think you're doing 2 + 2 and you're getting 4 and there's no room for doubt, maybe God has such awesome power that he could even make those self-evident mathematical truths turn out to be somehow incorrect. Having said that, though, that God could do it, Descartes kind of backs away from the brink. He says, okay, I told you God could do this because he's almighty, but he wouldn't do it even though he could. Why do you think Descartes makes that second claim? That if God, wanted to, he can make your math beliefs go wrong, but he just would not choose to do that, because what feature of God do you think he believes rules out him making that choice? Let me know if you could have a guess about that in our live chat here. Why wouldn't God want you to get math and geometry and such trigonometry stuff wrong? We're not talking about complicated like long division problems where people generally can make errors, but very elementary. 1 + 1 is 2. Why do you think he wouldn't want to do that? Right, Grant, because he's omnibenevolent. So they say he's too good to do that. That would be setting us up just to deceive us. And if the most obvious elementary things were false, then God would really be playing tricks on us. And he says that runs contrary to being perfectly benevolent and all good. So here's the state of play. He says, sense perception, no, it could all be a dream. So let's doubt that. Math and so forth, God could mess that up, but he wouldn't do it. But despite the fact that God would never do that because he's too good, there could be some being that is subordinate to God, meaning that it's not an omnibenevolent being, but still above us in terms of power and control. And it could be this being that is somehow manipulating our beliefs about even mathematics and logic. And so he claims of this second type of being that it could be, you ready for this, an evil demon. So he says, suppose there were some type of evil demon that had the ability to completely control the character of what you think you are perceiving and judging. In that case, this evil demon could possibly even subvert and overthrow your beliefs that you take to be so certain about math and so on. So that's the reason that even these formal truths of mathematics and such could be doubted, okay, because of the possibility of the evil demon. Now, you hear evil demon and probably you're thinking, wow, that's getting pretty weird. But keep in mind that it's a religious metaphor that he's using, and he's writing in 1641. I mean, if he had been writing in 2021, maybe he would have said, suppose there's a mad scientist who has your brain in a vat and he, inputs it with electrochemical stimuli that gives it certain perceptual beliefs and certain mathematical beliefs. The whole point is just that there's some kind of external source of error that's causing you to make the error, but it's just not going to be God because he's too good for that. He does not want to characterize God as the source of the manipulation. Okay, so where are we at? What's the state of play? The method of doubt is taking everything away from us, pretty much. First of all, it says all your perceptual beliefs, those are gone because those could be in a dream. So we're just going to assume and pretend anyway for the moment that they're false. What about math? Is that a source of certainty that I can hang on to? Even there he says, no, I'm sorry, because God could mess with you on that. Oops, he wouldn't do it, but an evil demon might. So that could be the reason. So now we're left with this question then. What is it that cannot be doubted? Is there anything that survives the method of doubt? That's kind of where he closes the first meditation. So it's like almost one of those, the terminology when you're reading a novel and it's a page turner, you have a cliffhanger at the end of one chapter, and so you really want to go on to the next. That's kind of how I read it in a way, because he finishes the first meditation saying, damn, it looks like almost everything can be thrown out by the method of doubt. Maybe we're not going to find the certainty that we thought we would find. Wouldn't that be sad? But then second meditation, chapter 2 starts, and he starts to now slowly build back up to our everyday conception of what we think we know. starting from scratch. So here's what he says on the beginning of the second chapter, Meditation 2. He says, so it's on 354, anyone that's reading or perhaps using their book. So serious are the doubts into which I have been thrown as a result of yesterday's meditation that I can neither put them out of my mind nor see any way of resolving them. It feels as if I've fallen unexpectedly into a deep whirlpool, which is tumbling me all around so that I can neither stand on the bottom nor swim up to the top. Nevertheless, I will make an effort and once more attempt the same path which I started on yesterday. Anything which admits of even the slightest doubt, I will set aside just as if I had found it to be completely false. And I will keep doing this until I recognize something certain. Or if I can't, then I'll at least recognize for certain that nothing is certain. Okay, so he says, there's one thing though. In the second meditation now, we're going to learn that there is one thing that can't be doubted at all. And let's think about it together, guys. What do you feel is one thing that even if everything else was a just fake, illusion, there's something that you can't doubt? It's in a way like impossible to doubt it because it's a self-contradiction to doubt this thing. Can anybody make a guess as to what is the one and only thing that even the method of doubt cannot undermine and, cause to be doubtful? What's something that you know and you can't doubt? Even saying you doubt it doesn't make sense. Let me know. It's kind of the basis of a famous quote. Some of you may have heard this quote escape out into the pop culture, seeping into your consciousness somewhere at the point of time in your life. Because there's one famous quotable quote of Descartes that somehow I find a lot of people know. It's actually even similar to this Billie Eilish song. I think she's kind of trying to make a reference to it. But anyway, yeah, so Nicole, that you exist, correct. That who exists? That you do. Now, why do you believe it's not possible to doubt your own individual existence? You, the first person. Do you feel me like there's no way to doubt that you exist? Why not? Why not? Can anyone open up on that? Because that's right, Nicole. Maybe some others can pick up the baton. Tell me why it's not even a possibility to doubt that you exist, you yourself. Because why? What makes it clear and evident that you have to exist? Yes, Noah, because you have consciousness, because you're thinking anything at all. So imagine this, a person sits back and says, I doubt that I exist. I don't think I exist. Don't you feel that that makes no sense? Because the even activity of doubting, the mental act of wondering, do I exist or not, establishes the existence of those who are thinking. So even if the whole world's a dream, there has to be a dreamer having the dream, doesn't there? You, the subject that's perceiving these things. So even if all else is false, one thing remains totally certain and immune from doubt. And that is the knowledge that you have of your own existence. So this is the basis of a famous quote of Descartes. Can anyone state this quote? Or if you can't, I'll certainly tell you. But I wonder if it's out there in your mind already. Anybody? Descartes establishes that he exists, and he knows this because he is thinking. So there's a quote that kind of puts those parts together. Maybe one knows it. Yeah, that's right, Grant. I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. What that means is that I'm thinking, like cognitive activity in my mind, and therefore I have to exist because the fact that you are thinking establishes your existence. I think, therefore I am, correct. In Latin, which was the original language that the Meditations was published in, the phrase is this phrase, just the same, but in Latin. Cogito, ergo sum. Cogito, ergo sum is what it says right there. If the glare is not too bad. Cogito, ergo, new word, sum. And in Latin, that means cogito stands for cognition, which means thought. That's the derivation of the word like cognitive and stuff. So cogito, thought. Ergo means therefore, like implied. So thought implies existence. Sum means to be real or to exist. So consciousness, therefore, existence. So we've got something then that actually even the method of doubt cannot destroy. The certain knowledge you have of your own existence. Now I have a little bit more to ask though on this topic. With Descartes' method of doubt, who do you know exists? So with this I think, therefore I am thing that we finally arrived at, whose existence do you have certain knowledge of? Whose exactly? If you're following these points in the argument or the discussion. That's right, you know of your own existence, Dimitri, But for example, do you know of my existence relative to yourself? Do you know that Dr. Vulich exists? Constraining yourself to the method of doubt. I know you believe that I exist, obviously. But if we're operating according to the method of doubt, could we say that the existence of your professor is certain? Because you say you know you exist, true. But do you know that I exist? Just a question. I grant you that you know you exist, certainly, because you are the thinker relative to yourself. But do you know that I exist or that other people exist? I'm using myself as the example because I'm talking to you, obviously. But good, you do not know that I exist. Why not? Correct, but why not? Let's answer in more full detail. Why is it that my existence is not just as certain as your own? I mean, I think aren't I talking to you? So what? I'm just playing devil's advocate, but go on and let me know. No, Ryan, I mean, why'd you retract your message? That's correct, what you said. But anyway, you do not know that I exist. True. Noah, you say you've never seen me in person, but hey, Noah, that's not even right either. Even if you had seen me in person, right? You still would not know that I exist. Why not? Even if I was in the room with you, you wouldn't know that I exist. And Dimitri, you kind of making the same slight error in a way, talking about I could be a robot. Sure. But even more fundamentally, guys, like okay, let me go in this direction. Your mom or dad, or it's like someone that you deal with like on the regular. Why is it that you do not know whether they exist? How come you don't know whether your parents exist? Yes, that's right, Nicole. Now you're getting it. I could be a figment of your imagination. Didn't we just say that the entire external world could be a dream? So when you have dreams, who's the only person that exists in the dream? It's you. So if you have a dream and you're hanging out with a bunch of friends, you're not hanging out with a bunch of friends. It's your mind that's creating simulations of human beings that you then interact with within the dream. So although you think that you're not dreaming now, we already said that the possibility exists that everything about external reality, aside from your consciousness that's perceiving it, could be a dream. So if you're in the midst of a wholesale illusion right now, it's not just me that you don't know to exist. It's all other minds except for your own, because you only have first-person access to the consciousness of one person, and that's you. Relative to yourself, all other human beings are third persons. They're others. You are the self, and all those other people are not you. So the verification of your own existence can only pass through your individual consciousness. You cannot, for example, be in the position of the other first person, verifying from the inside out that they have consciousness and cognitive activity. So I guess I could be a very complex computer program or dream-based illusion that you're having. So again, I think therefore I am establishes only existence of the first person. So it's possible, I guess, according to the Cartesian meditation here and the method of doubt, to suppose that the entire world does not exist and you're the only thing that's just dreaming everything. Now, I'll say this about Descartes' meditation. Sometimes at this stage of meditation too, people are like, wow, so that's what we've learned, that maybe the world is an illusion. Don't get it mixed up. He doesn't end his book on these conclusions. This is the second chapter, and actually we'll read the end later. And what you'll see is that by the time the book ends, he takes a long and winding loop back to everyday common sense. And so at the end of the book, he feels that he's now comfortable saying that I've proven, without just assuming it and taking it for granted, he thinks now he has proven that the external world exists, that there are other minds, and that your perceptions are generally correct to what is out there in the objective reality. But he says these are things we normally just hold as given assumptions that we never question. And he believes that having, more definitively proven them through a series of logical steps, that he arrives at these conclusions with greater certainty than people would have if he never wrote the meditations. So you might think, this is a strange task to take on. Why should we have to have certain proof about things that we already assume are true? But, to a philosopher of this time period, it's important to set the foundations properly for human knowledge. And that means we've got to proceed from a baseline of certainty. So the certainty, the foundation stone at the bottom is, I think, therefore I am. And then that is like our point of leverage that eventually allows us to build back up to the broader conception of human knowledge that we do take for granted. But at least initially, he says, all is subject to doubt except for your own existence. Now, I'll give you a very brief right now statement of the preview of where he goes later to kind of bring us back to our everyday common sense. It's not the typical path that you might think, but it goes in this direction. He says, okay, well, since you know you exist, let's start with that. You exist. Maybe you don't even have a body, but you know that you have a mind. Like at the very least, you're like some kind of disembodied ghost thinking of things, supposing that maybe the physical body doesn't exist. So you know you exist at a minimum as a mind. So let's consider what's going on in your mind. You have ideas. And he says, within the mind of you, there are many ideas, but one of them is the idea of God. And from his view, the idea of God is a unique and a special idea because it's the idea of some infinite being. So we'll go over this in much more depth later when we get to that 6th chapter in a few weeks. But what he says about the idea of God is that it's basically too infinite to come from nothing. And that means that it has to come from some infinite being. So he's got his kind of own spin on the ontological argument, as it were. It starts with the idea you have of God in your mind is so infinite and great that it has to correspond to something that is that infinite. Therefore, God is real. And that's the point that he thinks unlocks everything else. Once he thinks he's proven that God exists, he goes from there to say God is so good and benevolent that he won't deceive us, which guarantees that when we have clear and distinct perceptions, they're basically true. And then he thinks within the clear and distinct perceptions are such things as the external world exists, other minds exist, and things are basically true to the way that I perceive them. But that's the kind of weird, long and winding road that he takes to get back to, so there is an external world and you can trust your 5 senses. Interestingly, he passes through a proof of God's existence on his way towards that result. And so from Descartes' view, if you didn't have the ability to prove God existed, everything would permanently remain subject to doubt, because it's only the guarantee provided by God's benevolence that we should be able to trust our 5 senses. But if we didn't believe in God or think we could prove he exists, then he thinks we'd be stuck with the constraints imposed on us by the method of doubt, and we'd permanently be left to wonder whether any of this stuff is true. Now, I don't know if I agree with every element of his argument, but it's quite interesting in its own right. And that was really the substance and the core of today's lesson, to get to the first 2 meditations and tell you about, what his project was and how he thought he got to at least establish that I think, therefore I am, even if other things are at least initially subject to doubt. On Wednesday, when we resume next meeting, I'm going to talk to you guys about the work of Albert Einstein. So we're actually going to change gears into another topic, the metaphysics of time. And so this will be the end of our unit on epistemology that I guess took 4 meetings, basically. I'm going to go through a little crash course on the theory of relativity with you guys on Wednesday. So do read the short article by Albert Einstein in our book called Time and the Relativity of Simultaneity. And then that'll be a fun thing for us to look at for a few weeks too. So guys, I think we're kind of close to the end. Let me know if you're all good. And if so, I'll just go ahead and close the live stream. I'll be in touch with you guys. We'll see each other on Wednesday. So let me know. Everything's good? Okay. Thanks so much. Yes, got it. Perfect. Thank you, guys. And I'll see you then on Wednesday. So until next time. Bye-bye. Hello.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Thanks.